the Earth is a living planet, it's moving. Because there is heat coming out, and that produces this movement at the surface. While the plate moves below, it's pushing hard, so there is deformation on the upper part, but it doesn't break. But then you reach the limit of resistance of the material, and boom.
A 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck early this morning in south-central Turkey.
An earthquake that large in a country that is that populated is going to be a problem.
We are witnessing at this hour an unimaginable and heartbreaking scene of Turkey.
Survivors are still being found buried in the rubble.
So it was a very large region that was affected by that magnitude 7.8. This main shock broke a fault that was 350 kilometers long.
Casualty figures are simply horrific.
The closer to the surface, the more damage a quake will cause.
So it's a big disaster, yes.
The tectonic plate under Turkey is in constant motion.
I'm Dara Goldberg. I'm a research geophysicist at the U.S. Geological Survey, and I also serve as an event coordinator for the USGS's National Earthquake Information Center. We get data collected from seismic instrumentation all around the globe. And then we have a team of analysts that work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to help us understand exactly where the earthquake began, exactly what time, and how big that earthquake was.
The US Geological Survey is a global hub of scientific expertise, monitoring the Earth's pulse by tracking earthquakes, volcanoes, and natural hazards around the world for the past 145 years. When two massive earthquakes hit southern Turkey and northern Syria last February, the USGS was a silent partner in their journey towards recovery and continued being a watchful guardian for the future.
So in short, earthquakes are caused due to plate tectonics. And plate tectonics is the process that is caused because there is a lot of heat in the Earth's core, and it's trying to diffuse that heat out through the Earth's surface. And at their interface, where two plates meet, there's a lot of friction between the plates. And so as the plates try to move past each other, they will be locked at the location of their interface and cause rapid sliding, where that interface gets to catch up with the rest of the rigid plate that's been getting dragged around by the mantle. And that rapid sliding is an earthquake.
A series of powerful successive earthquakes struck the Turkish-Syrian border. The first and most powerful was a 7.8 magnitude quake.
So faults are places where you have two pieces of rock that come together and it's held together by friction, sort of like these two rocks. When an earthquake happens, it doesn't just happen at a point, like we often see a dot on a map. It actually happens over a whole fault plane. So if we pretend this is an earthquake or this is a fault, earthquake's gonna happen, and then they move. They move along this whole three-dimensional surface, which is the fault plane, not just one little piece.
With over 83 million people calling it home, Turkey is situated at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. At the heart of global commerce, the country controls the waterways like the Bosphorus and connects east and west in the flow of trade, defense, and culture. But Turkey's strategic location comes with a geological reality. It also lies on constant seismic activity.
Turkey is in a very seismically active area of the world. You have 3 plates meeting. You have the African and Arabian plates in the south, and they're moving north toward the Eurasian plate. And there's a microplate called the Anatolian microplate that's part of the Eurasian plate.
Here you have Arabia that's moving to the north. You see the arrow at 24 millimeter per year. Okay? And then here you have Africa that's moving 10 millimeters per year to the north. 24, 10. They are pushing both toward them. And that's the North Anatolian fault. There the motion is about 18 millimeter per year. It's moving all the time. The motion is continuous. No earthquake there. Anatolia is moving one way and Arabia another way. You have deformation at the surface, and this deformation is continuous elastically. But you reach the limit of resistance, boom, you have the earthquake.
On the morning of February the 6th, 2023, Turkey woke up to a nightmare.
This morning, here on the ground in Turkey, unimaginable devastation as far as the eye can see.
In the early hours of the morning, a series of powerful earthquakes have caused widespread damage and killed almost 1,500 people. Many thousands more have been injured.
4.30'da 04.30'da benim telefonum çaldı. İlk aklıma çocuklarım geldi. Yani öyle o saatte telefon çalınca ben bu telefonu açtığım zaman daha uykulu ne olduğunu anlamadan bir baktım göçükte bir kadın, yanında da kız çocuğu. Hocam bizi kurtar diyor. Ben daha ne olduğunu anlamadan tabii kapandı, her şey karıştı etti. İlk koştum televizyonu açtım. Felaketi görünce yani sinirim bozuldu.
And here we're having an aftershock as I'm speaking here.
As the hours ticked by, the magnitude of the disaster began to sink in. The confirmed death toll showed 53,537, with 107,213 injured. AFAD, short for the Disaster and Emergency Management Presidency, immediately went to the affected areas and started the rescue operations. It is estimated that a total of 14 million people, 16% of the country's entire population, were affected. And about 1.5 million people were left homeless, according to the United Nations.
Battaniye var mı çocuğu sarılıyor? Anne geliyor.
Annen hastanede.
We are witnessing at this hour an unimaginable and heartbreaking scene of Turkey.
Survivors are still being found buried in the rubble.
The story across Turkey and Syria this morning, more than 21,000 dead, and yet still the miracles.
Search and rescue teams in Turkey surveying the damage, searching through rubble using flashlights, looking for anyone who may still be trapped.
The UN says more help is on its way and has urged governments not to hinder aid supplies.
İlk deprem yani 6 Şubat 7.8 büyüklüğünde olan deprem Ölü Deniz Fayı üzerinde oldu. Doğu Anadolu fayının bir bölümü sürgü fayı bu olan depremden etkilendi. Zaten yeterince orada da stres birikmişti. Ölü Deniz Fayı olunca bir ekstra stres daha transfer edildi. Zaten deprem üretecekti. Ekstra bir stres gelince o da kırıldı 9 saat sonra. Ve sonuç olarak da ikinci deprem oldu.
Deprem meydana geldi şu anda. Şu anda deprem meydana geldi. Kayıtta mısın? Deprem meydana geldi.
Southern Turkey has been hit by another earthquake.
Another blow for families already enduring the aftermath of a catastrophic string of earthquakes and running for safety once again.
But there have been almost 30 other shocks in the region, all powerful enough to magnify the damage. The earthquake was felt 700 kilometers away in Gaza and in Egypt.
O da 7.6. Şimdi böyle iki büyük deprem peş peşe olunca tabii bölgeyi haşat etti. Çok önemli. Yani aşağı yukarı Adıyaman'dan tutun işte Antakya'ya kadar 11 ilde büyük hasar meydana getirdi.
There are many cities and towns in the region for continental strike-slip earthquakes like the East Anatolian Fault. It's very rare to have an earthquake of this size or larger. Globally, we only have a very few examples of earthquakes of this type that are this size or bigger. The magnitude 7.8 earthquake broke a fault over 300 to 350 kilometers long from almost the Mediterranean Sea all the way inland to the close to the city of Malatya. So it was a very large region that was affected by that magnitude 7.8 main shock. The magnitude 7.5 aftershock broke a smaller fault, but still 100 to 150 kilometers long. So again, a large area affected.
The triggered fault line was 350 kilometers long, roughly the same distance from the Italian capital Milan to Bern, the de facto capital of Switzerland.
For us in Japan, we have earthquake greater than magnitude 8 is every 10 years or something.
Just like Turkey, Japan is prone to seismic shifts, with the ground beneath the country trembling almost every decade. Recently, on January the 2nd, 2024, a magnitude 7.6 earthquake struck the country. A little more than a decade ago, the Great East Japan earthquake with 9.1 magnitude devastated the country, even leading to the Fukushima nuclear disaster.
The case of Kobe, for our case, which was a magnitude 6.9, it's only 30 kilometers long. But in the Kama Marsh earthquake is 300 kilometers long. So they're 10 times larger than the Kobe. I mean, in Turkey, right? And that's enlarged the damage zone.
Now, aid agencies are warning that time is running out to rescue people in Turkey in the rubble of buildings that were destroyed by Monday's powerful earthquakes.
Rescue teams are still trying to find survivors more than 90 hours after the quakes.
So, when an earthquake happens, what we feel is dependent upon several different things. The magnitude of the earthquake, or how much energy was released, how big the earthquake was. The local rock and soil conditions, soft sands and soils will shake harder and for a longer period of time than bedrock and mountains. And also your distance away from the earthquake. And that's the map distance, like from one point to another point, but it's also the distance down inside the earth.
This earthquake was at a depth of 15 kilometers. So the shallower an earthquake is, the more intense the shaking is at the surface.
Another factor that amplified the earthquake's destructive power was its shallow depth. The quake originated just 15 kilometers below the surface, making the shockwaves more fatal and leaving little time to escape.
And because this earthquake in Turkey was very shallow, it was very close to where people lived, and it caused really extreme shaking on the surface.
The ground surface moved 5 to 10 meters in a lateral direction and broke all kinds of infrastructure, roads, railways, gas lines, and other types of infrastructure that crossed that fault.
The shallowness is a key factor. So we mostly have deeper earthquakes in Japan. So that means that the area that people can feel the shaking is wider. But the shaking itself is weaker. But in the case of Turkey or other active floating earthquakes, shallow, and they're just concentrated their energy along the fault line rather than off fault. In terms of the number of the fatalities, Turkish earthquake is the 5th earthquake in 21st century. Yeah.
As one of the worst natural disasters of our recent history, the February the 6th earthquake is ranked the 5th deadliest earthquake of the 21st century, the 23rd largest earthquake ever recorded since the 20th century.
The largest magnitude earthquakes that we have in the world occur offshore on subduction zone boundaries. We don't have strike-slip faults on continents that are too much bigger than that. So Turkey has 2 of them in the world, and a great corollary is the San Andreas Fault Zone in California, which can host similar-sized earthquakes and has in the past.
The San Andreas Fault is more than just a line on the Californian map. The Fort Tejon earthquake of 1857 was recorded as 7.9 and shook the southern part of California for miles and miles. It is still considered as one of the largest recorded earthquakes in the United States. In 1906, the vibrant city of San Francisco was shaken by a 7.8 earthquake that left the entire city in ruins. The earthquake, the deadliest in US history, claimed over 3,000 lives and caused 80% of the city to perish.
California is very comparable in nature to the tectonics here in southern Turkey. The San Andreas Fault and the Hayward Fault are both very large strike-slip earthquakes that have in the past experienced earthquakes of this size, both in 1857 and in 1906. If we had those earthquakes today, there would be significant impacts. The country has obviously grown significantly. There are a lot more people, there's a lot more infrastructure. And while we have building codes that attempt to make modern construction resilient to that earthquake shaking, there would still be significant impact from such an earthquake today.
The last time this happened in this place in Turkey was about 500 years ago. And how do you remember what happened 500 years ago? And how many people were there? Much less than today. And that's actually a very important warning for us, you see. Because us scientists, we like to work with good scientific data. But how long have we had good scientific data for earthquakes? A few tens of years, maximum 100 years, but it's not very good compared to 500 years.
To this date, earthquake prediction remains a mystery, despite the technological advancements in the field. Even though we now have valuable insight into the Earth's dynamics, the limited nature of seismic data makes the forecast significantly harder. The earthquake shook Turkey to its core, testing its solidarity. But neighbours dug through rubble, complete strangers offered shelter, doctors worked endless hours, and even the youngest of children shared their toys with the earthquake survivors.
It's absolutely devastating. I can't imagine, as a father of three, as a family member, having to experience that type of event.
My heart really goes out. I think about the moms there, because I'm a mom. And how do you protect your kids? You know, you do the very best you can. And I think about them a lot, and I hope they're doing okay. This is every day for them. Their homes, businesses, schools have been destroyed. People are living with trauma, and they continue to feel shaking.
Yeah, this earthquake has had an absolutely devastating death toll. And I've seen different reports for the economic toll of this earthquake, anywhere from $30 to $100 billion US, which is an incredibly large number.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan announced that the reconstruction of the affected areas would cost an estimated $104 billion. In June, the newly appointed Finance Minister Mehmet Şimşek stated that the disaster's impact on the budget was nearly 10% of the country's GDP. While the financial toll is undeniable and is predicted to continue for the following 2 years, Turkey is determined not just in rebuilding structures, but in rebuilding a brighter tomorrow for all.
I've seen a quite incredible recovery already in the Turkish region, just from what we've been able to monitor through the news. There have been lots of recovery operations in the days in the aftermath of the earthquake to rescue people from the rubble, and then in the weeks since that time to try to clear that rubble and prepare the region for reconstruction. The Turkish government seems to have committed a lot of resources to rebuild infrastructure and apartment buildings and housing in the region to reaccommodate the people that have been displaced by this earthquake, which is far greater in number than the people that have died as a result of the event. But those recovery operations naturally take time. It takes a long time to rebuild the number of buildings that have been affected by this event.
In science, there is no prediction. The question is, with science now, we can get ready for it and minimize the devastation.
What we can do is something called earthquake early warning. You have an earthquake that starts, and then multiple seismometers will detect shaking from that event above a certain level. They then send out information to centers, to seismologists, who then send it out to all of the people living in that area to say, shaking is coming. You may get a second warning, you may get 10 seconds warning, you may get 30 seconds warning. And you may be thinking, I mean, who cares about 10 seconds warning? You would care if you're going to the dentist. You would care if you're getting LASIK eye surgery or if you're having an operation. With that amount of warning, we can do things like open the doors to allow emergency response vehicles to leave so that the doors don't get jammed shut. We can make sure that we slow down trains to prevent derailments. And then we can have services like gas lines, water lines, they can automatically turn off so that when the earthquake waves arrive, you have less damage to infrastructure, and then we're able to respond more appropriately. So even though it's not prediction, it does give you those few moments of warning that can mean life or death in some situations.
Turkey has established seismic hazard maps, has established seismic codes to ensure that modern construction is built to withstand significant earthquake shaking. But there are also older buildings that were built before those seismic codes, and if those haven't been retrofitted, then those are particularly vulnerable to damage from these earthquakes. Older buildings suffered significant damage, and if there are lots of people in those buildings, then we unfortunately have a large death toll as well.
Every earthquake that happens teaches us something. We learned from the Kobe earthquake, and we're going to learn a lot from these earthquakes in Turkey. And it's devastating to know what happens to the people that live in those areas and to know the suffering that they have. And so we try and find what we can and take the knowledge that we get from these earthquakes so that we can apply it to other places around the world to make sure that this type of damage doesn't happen again.